God is a good shepherd that takes care of his sheep. And we too, as churches and as parents, should take care of the little sheep that are in our presence, sometimes the littlest children.
Yeah. That's it is interesting to see that, God's, while he's, when we talk about this a lot in different contexts, how God is a God of mercy and grace and love, but he also he takes vengeance and he takes offending his holiness in the way that we treat one another very seriously.
Yeah, that's good. So, we've talked about theological triage before, in podcasts before. And so I want to ask, in light of that kind of stuff, and it won't directly relate to it, but what that's talking about priorities, and what priorities should we place on protecting the vulnerable? Should it kind of be just just kind of something that's barely in our head, we kind of loosely think about it, or should we take it a lot more seriously than that then?
I think it's a high priority issue, making sure that the strong don't exploit the weak, because the strong will exploit the weak when sinners are involved. And, you can get into government and political conversations about that, and, I don't think there's a one right way on how that should work, but, within the church setting, it's something that we should be aware of. And at thankfully, churches are becoming more and more aware that, hey, this is something we've got to have things in place to protect our children. One thing to protect themselves, but it's keeping the children safe in our care, because there are those who would do them harm.
Yeah, that's good. I'm not a big leadership development type of guy by any stretch, but I've heard multiple people that are into that kind of thing talk about Walt Disney, and he was big on core values. And one of Walt Disney's top core values, actually his very, very top core values for all the Disney Corporation that everyone was supposed to hold highest, was not to make sure people had the most fun possible. It was not to make the greatest quality product. Instead, his top core value was safety. It was always safety. Safety is that comes before everything else, and always. So, even heard that he would have instructed these park employees that, if they were talking to someone trying to help them figure out where the next ride is, and they overheard somebody screaming in the distance, they're required, according to their priority values, to run to the screaming person, even if they seemed rude to the person that was asking for help. I think he was onto something. Walt Disney was onto something. I think this needs to be in our top tier of values in that same kind of way. We are entrusted with kids by God, as well as by parents, I think that's very true, that parents are trusting us to take care of our kids. So safety must trump quality of experience. I think it's easy for us to focus far more on the quality of experience, but far before that, we need to make sure that the kids that are in our care are taken care of and kept safe. The reality is God values the vulnerable, and He calls us to take care of them like He does. And so we need to prioritize that a great deal. In our philosophy, we have a philosophy ministry at our church, kind of a vision of philosophy ministry, what we really care about the most in our children's and family ministry is written out. And we put child safety as one of our three main focuses in that philosophy of ministry. And I think actually the interesting thing is Walt Disney was even more onto something, because I think that valuing safety enables us to better value other things. If we care about safety, we're going to be more able to reach out to people. We're going to be able to better teach people. Certainly, a kid with a broken leg, a kid that's child abused, is not going to be as receptive to our teaching as those that are kept safe. So those devoted to teaching the next generation should be the most committed to safety, even more than Walt Disney, right?
Hey, if it's good enough for Walt Disney, it's good enough for me.
Exactly. So now, how does human depravity impact how we keep children safe, Ben?
Well, I think just what you said a minute ago. We recognize the presence and the power of sin. Some people will intentionally prey on children precisely because they're weak. Now, I was looking at that book On Guard just a little bit before we were recording, and Deepak Reju was recounting the testimony before the Senate of a man, and he said that there were children. He said almost without exception, every child I've molested was lonely and longing for attention. and it just, hey, I've got an easy way in. And so it's a power thing for a lot of them. And I don't understand all the motives. There's more than that. But that's often one that I hear. And we can't be naive enough to think that it's not going to happen at our place because, we know our people. We all love Jesus. We're good people. We shouldn't be on a witch hunt, but we just have to be realistic that this could happen. We've got to have proper protections in place because we have these little image bearers of God that we're caring for. And, and I don't know, you talked about the No Country for Old Men. I don't know if it happens more now or not, but I know that the idolization of sex that we have in our society has only hurt the vulnerable, like women and children. The prevalence of pornography and child pornography and violent pornography. I mean, it just destroys, and it just leaves this wake of destruction. And I mean, it is more visible now that with news, 24-hour cable news networks and things like that. Again, I don't know the frequency, but some of the things we have swirling around in the culture, they really don't help.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some people that might claim to be Christians, even a pastor that has the belief that humans are basically good, and that the people that do really, really bad things, it was because something bad was happened to them. Now, I think that kind of goes beyond an endless bunny trail of who did the bad things to them and why did they do that if everyone's good. But nonetheless, I think that brings up something that is deeply true. That's wrong. We are not basically good. That sin is natural to us. Even really horrible sin is part of our nature since the fall, and it is common and kind of natural to do the wicked and depraved things. It might not all be that kind of severe things of child abuse for most, and we certainly hope, and by God's common grace, the vast, vast majority will never do something like child abuse. But we have to know, because of the evilness and wickedness of sin, everyone has the potential of doing something that awful. Everyone apart from Jesus has the potential for that. Even the most trustworthy Christian, that somebody who is devoutly in Christ, and some child abusers really have been Christian. So they have a really powerful darkness, a sin struggle within that can overcome in a way that causes people a great deal of pain. And this, I don't want to come across that I'm not telling everyone, don't trust anyone. We're not called to distrust people or assume the worst. Assume that if somebody wants to volunteer for a children's ministry, that they're going to murder every single person that they ever encounter. That's probably not going to happen. But instead, we have to make policies that realize what we are capable of. And I think at the same time, the flip side of that coin is understanding sin means we realize that we have to realize that we have the potential. That means that we have to realize our kids contain evil within themselves as well, contain sins within, and they have a potential to destroy people with that sin. So just as that we have to understand from our sinful nature that somebody can hurt a child very, very badly in their sin, we have to have policies that recognize that, a child is capable of making a false accusation against someone as well, because our children are sinners. So we have to really take safety and take accountability incredibly seriously. Human depravity then is the reason why we have to have so many rules that we have, I think understanding human depravity is why we have to have 2 adult policies, because knowing that that each person has the potential of doing something really bad, or a child the potential of really hurting somebody very badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really helpful points.
Now, how does a church demonstrate the importance of child safety in its procedures and policies?
First of all, I think by just having something. There are places where really there's not, as long as there's somebody in there, Yeah. So I think having some measure of protection. I think having waiting periods to serve is helpful. Again, we're not drawing these things straight out of the Bible. It's just collected wisdom from people. But I know our church has a policy of you have to be a member for 6 months.
That's good.
Because often, if people are looking to pray, they're not going to wait around. And requiring membership and in good standing. I mean, you're not going to let someone under church discipline come in. But you've mentioned the two adult policy. I think doing background checks is also good, and telling people. I mean, you have to get their consent to do it, and so you're letting them know up front. Now, this is something that I need to improve on, but interviewing people and getting a sense of their story, it helps you pastor them, but also it's just helping to guard the sheep pen, and then training and retraining and reminding workers of the policies. Sometimes there's a conference or a workshop that might be helpful, and then just using material that's been produced by somebody else. Sometimes they go, oh, hey, the guy's an expert. And often it's just well done. And these people, they are experts. And so, making use of those things out there for people who serve the wider church.
Like On Guard. So,
yeah.
Example of that. So, you got very specific in the nitty gritty with that. And I think that's really helpful. And I'm going to be a little more vague. For me, this means that we need to spell things out. That even if I'm going to be vague and give the vague definition, that we need to spell things out. Do things like Ben suggested. We need to spell things out, specific policies in our policy manuals, even if they seem unnecessary and tedious to some. And there will be some that find, that, I never had to have this when I was asked to watch my grandkids. But we have to persist nonetheless. We need to be willing to make policies that might seem even inconvenient, but that do protect kids. I do think of that 2-adult policy. I think of even policies like we have a policy that only women are able to change diapers or take children to the bathroom. And we do that because statistics show that I think 80% of those who abuse children, boys or girls, are men. And we don't think that our men are going to abuse people, but we know that people are watching. And we know that when a visitor comes in, a visitor is going to be leery when they see a man changing their child's diaper. And so we're going to have policies that, that's inconvenient. If a woman's in the room and the man is, and she's busy dealing with a crying baby, it's easy for that help the man change the diaper. But we have to be mindful of that, even if it's inconvenient. We need to explain why child safety is important, not just what not to do. Like you said, having those times of training, referring to books, not just make child safety an issue of don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, but make a vision an important element of it.
That's helpful too, because it can when you frame it that way, and we probably have done that too much here, the list of don'ts, so the law. But when you help frame it more positively, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, we didn't do this, back in the day, but I can see why that's a good idea, or why we should at least, whether I agree with that specific policy or not, the overall intention is for protecting the kids. And so,
is following these procedures a service to God, or is it just technicalities that matter little? Especially, I think this is relevant for the volunteer that's never going to be in a position like you or I are in. That is it just kind of some tedious technicality that you just have to get over with or just even ignore? Or is it something that legitimately is service to God?
I think it is. It is actually a way of serving God, of honoring Him. Talked about the inconvenience factor. Sometimes it is inconvenient. This is it's a headache having to consider these things and then make sure this is happening. And thinking through this is maybe go, man, we need to tighten the belt on something. Tighten down on some things where we got a little lax. Because it is a way to bring glory to God as we care for those little image bearers. And, it's sort of like inspecting a bridge regularly or holding up making sure that a wall is good because of the potential fallout from it.
Sometimes following these themes can seem annoying and inconvenient. I'm going to fully acknowledge that. And I think it's important for us to do that. That there are some of these policies, it's easy to not understand. It's not things. We require things in our church that we would by no stretch require for people that would watch our kids, And it would be silly for us, Ben and I, to require background checks to have friends watch kids. But we have to go through these hoops when the church is involved. It's just a reality. Sometimes following these things can seem this way, but we do serve God by being willing to be inconvenienced, even if it's being willing to be inconvenienced in a way that you're not when you're watching your grandkids. We trust God then by following those in authority, even when we don't understand.